With Subutai finally showing up in game in Rise of Kingdoms, and with King Arthur having shown up over a month ago at this point, just crazy for me to think about, today we're going to look into the future at what I suspect the next commanders might be coming to Rise of Kingdoms. We're going to go over the who, what, when, where, why, how, all that good stuff, so make sure you stay tuned. But first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Before we jump in, as you guys know, I am a partner created with Rise of Kingdoms, which means that they support a few videos on the channel every single month, just like this one. But the most important support comes from you guys dropping a thumbs up down below and subscribing. I also want to let you guys know that I do have a sore throat, and so I might sound a little weird, but just know that this video is painful to make, so I'm gonna just push through it as fast as I can to get this out to you guys. Okay, so Subutai and King Arthur, the latest commanders to land into the game. These are cavalry commanders. Of course, Subutai actually not on the Mightiest Governor at the time of recording this video, which is a little bit weird. I definitely suspected them to be in this Mightiest Governor, and it's not too late. There is a chance that he could show up here. I've seen in the past that they will update this commander list as we get closer to the actual MGE, so it's not to say that he won't be in this MGE, but it is surprising that he's not just there by default right now, so we'll have to see what that means. But honestly, I thought he was going to be in the last one that just ended a couple of days ago. But regardless, the current cycle we're in is cavalry, and so the question becomes, the next commanders that come out in Rise of Kingdoms, what troop type will they be? And to answer that question, we can jump over to my commander release order spreadsheet here, and you can see that I have been sort of tracking the commander releases throughout all of Rise of Kingdoms history. You can see even Siege has been updated into this list here, and if we scroll all the way down, you'll see I've updated this with King Arthur and Subutai as well. And I've been keeping track of, you know, the days in between these commander releases, because that kind of helps me understand how close we are to the next commander release. And you'll notice that there's kind of a pattern here as we go back through the years of Rise of Kingdoms releases. There's a couple of things that break this pattern a little bit. For example, we have Ragnar Prime here that has just been a random infantry commander that we got in the middle of November, which was weird. Of course, he was part of the special King of All Britain KVK, and that was kind of why, I guess. And also in that KVK, he can be used as any troop type, so it's like he's technically infantry, but you know, it is what it is. Regardless, if we scroll back through the years here, you can see that there is kind of a pattern. If you look at the three main troop types going all the way back to Genghis Khan and Saladin, typically after cavalry we get infantry, right? Cavalry, infantry, archers, cavalry, infantry, archers, leadership, cavalry, infantry, archers, leadership, cavalry, infantry, archers, leadership. Yo, that song's a banger, bro. Anyway, with that being said, I think it's most logical to assume that the next release is going to be infantry commanders, which is really exciting for me because I typically run 2 infantry marches in the open field. So I'm stoked about this release, but a couple of things come to mind. First of all, when are we going to be getting these commanders? And second of all, what is the sort of progression of commanders going to look like in 2025? If we tackle that second question first, I think we have to take a look at some of the more recent commander releases and gauge their power level, so to speak. And you know, if we look back at throughout 2024, the power level of these commanders was not that crazy until you got to Ragnar Prime. I would say Ragnar Prime was the most interesting. I would say that Herman Prime was quite interesting as well. By the way, this is for open field fighting. Ashurbanipal still is pretty relevant to open field fighting as well, and not to say that these other commanders aren't, but a lot of the commanders in 2024 had a mild reception, I would say. And I think moving into 2025, we immediately started the year off with King Arthur with a bang, right? And so we have to ask ourselves, is 2025 going to make up for what 2024 was lacking? Or is King Arthur sort of just one little bump for cavalry, and then we will continue to have a minor niche micro optimizations for commander lineups, right? I think that is, I mean, if we really take a look at a lot of these commanders, that is kind of what we saw, right? I mean, obviously Gajamat and Cordoba were kind of, they're still cream of the crop when it comes to ranged, but like Belisarius Prime, Shajar, William Wallace, these are all commanders that are sort of like minor upgrades to a lineup. They're good, they're usable, they're fine, but they weren't like game breaking, right? Whereas we saw Ragnar Prime, he's not game breaking in a sense that he's like super unique, but he's just really strong. His active skill just hits really hard, and historically that works really well until he gets power crept. King Arthur hits really hard and he can be used as skill or combo. So you know, moving forward into 2025, are we going to see every release be more in line with King Arthur and Ragnar Prime, or is it going to be more in line with the sort of subtle upgrades that we saw in 2024? And personally, I think that we might continue to see more of the niche subtle upgrades that we saw in 2024, except I think they're going to be a little bit more powerful, but in a more niche down direction. So for example, it could be a commander that is really strong if you use the correct formation, for example. Otherwise, if you don't have that formation, it'll just be sort of a side upgrade or a minor upgrade, something along those lines, right? That's kind of what I suspect 2025 to be like, because I just can't imagine a massive power creep, big spike in power throughout the entirety of the year. I could be wrong, right? I could be wrong, but that's what I'm betting will be the case. Now that I've given you guys my sort of expectation from a quote unquote like power progression level, when might we get these new infantry commanders? And I think if the Subutai MGE is this upcoming one, which it might not be, but if it is, then we can expect the new infantry commanders to show up the first week of May. And that would be, you know, I guess technically it could be anywhere from the last week, or the last, I should say, Mightiest Governor and Wheel of April through, you know, the middle of May. I would say that is the most reasonable window, and so that's what I would be preparing for if I were you. Now, if they were going to take, you know, I don't think that they'll go the 56-day route. If you go back here, a lot of times commanders are released either 56, 70, or 84 days. Only recently have they been like super quick and super, you know, rapid fire, and that's just because Ragnar Prime literally like broke the rule for everything. Otherwise, if you took a look at the difference in time between this and Shajar, for example, it was 70 days, right? So that's just in line. I think King Arthur once again was an exception. They just gave King Arthur to players because they were going to release the commander swap feature, and imagine how bad players would have reacted if they gave us the commander swap feature, everyone got Belisarius Prime or something, and then right away they released King Arthur. People would be pissed. They just, you know, invested in something that immediately got power crept, right? So that's why I think personally, that's why I think they gave us King Arthur early, as you can see, way early, right? It's been over a month since we've had King Arthur in the game. We still don't even have his Mightiest Governor counterpart yet. So with that being said, I would argue that it's logical that they will go either 70 or 84 days. I don't think it'll be shorter, because we saw such a rapid fire release window in here, right? All throughout like November, December, January, like we got crazy release window there, and we got all the new epic commanders as well. We got Siege, like we got so many commanders in that time frame that I think that they probably won't do the 56-day window. I suspect it'll be the 70 or 84-day window. All that to say that I suspect it will show up sometime in the early or middle of May. That's most likely, with late April being possible but unlikely. That's kind of where I'm at with that. Now, if we look back through history and we ask ourselves, you know, what sort of talent trees can we expect these new commanders to be? Well, you know, if we look historically, and we can sort of ignore Ragnar Prime because Ragnar Prime was not part of a standard release, but if we look back at the most recent infantry release, it was a rally and open field commander, and prior to that it was a garrison and open field commander, and prior to that it was a rally and open field commander, and prior to that it was a garrison open field commander. And so if we go back throughout time, all the way back through 2021 and even farther, you'll see that the sort of pattern that we find ourselves with is that it alternates between rally garrison, and the other commander is pretty much always an open field commander, right? So with that being said, and also you'll notice that the open field commander is almost always the wheel commander, right? You have to go back pretty far to break that rule. So with that being said, I suspect the open field commander is going to be the wheel commander, right? And I suspect that the Mightiest Governor commander is going to be a garrison commander, right? Because we recently got Scipio Emilianus, that was rally, so now it's time for the other, which is garrison, and there we go. So now we know that we are expecting a garrison and field set of infantry commanders. What might the blue talent tree be? That's the question. And this is actually a really difficult question to answer, right? Because the knee-jerk reaction is Smite, right? Like we look back through, you know, the most recent releases for commanders, and it seems to be the case that infantry gets Smite damage exclusively, with ranged also getting Smite damage. And it seems like cavalry are now going in the combo direction with, I'm just going to peel back the curtain for a minute. I think the next engineering commanders are going to be combo damage, because I mean, they've already revealed combo ranged. It's in the game text, so they're already kind of preparing for that. So I mean, that's logical. So my expectation is that cavalry get combo, and we have archers that have mighty healing with true damage, and wouldn't you know, Gajamada also has mighty healing. So it seems like each troop type's gimmick is also shared with ranged. Okay, so I guess that makes ranged a little bit special in that way. But all that to say that, you know, the knee-jerk reaction is that, oh well, it's infantry, so of course it's going to be the Smite tree, right? But I don't think that's necessarily like a given, right? I mean, it could, and it would be nice, and it would make sense for that to be the case, but there's literally that is not to be expected, right? There's no rule for that. We've literally only seen one infantry release with the Smite tree, and if we look at Smite as the infantry skill damage counterpart, right, then, you know, just because a commander with skill damage didn't mean they always got the skill tree, right? And in the same way, just because infantry gets Smite damage doesn't mean they'll always get the Smite tree. And as a matter of fact, we have, you know, Liu Che and Gorgo as an example of commanders that don't have the Smite tree. Now of course they were put in the game before they added the Smite tree, and before they sort of committed full force to that, so that could be the reason why. But needless to say, I don't necessarily think that these commanders are guaranteed to have the Smite tree. Now I do think that if they have any amount of damage factor, I do think it will be Smite damage, right? So don't get confused. I think these commanders will probably be Smite damage commanders, but I'm not convinced that they will have the Smite talent tree, if that makes any sense, right? There's just no reason to assume that that would be the case. Again, it makes sense logically, and it would be nice, but you know, it would just be boring. Can you imagine how boring it would be if every single infantry release just got the Smite tree? Like, that's stupid. They wouldn't do that. I can't imagine they would do that. That would be really boring. So who knows? Now, if we start with the Garrison commander, right? Let's start with the Garrison commander. Between the Garrison commander and the open field commander, I think the Garrison commander is more likely to have the Smite tree out of the two. And the reason for that is because if we look at the commanders that we've already got for infantry, we've already got a rally Smite commander and a field Smite commander. So we're actually missing a Garrison Smite commander, right? Like, we actually haven't seen that yet. And so I think from a game balance perspective, it might make sense to release a Garrison Smite tree commander just to see the interplay between that and Gorgo. And by the way, that would actually be a little bit of counter synergy as well, because Gorgo actually has a smaller rage requirement. She has a 900 rage requirement compared to everybody else, so putting her as secondary is a little bit unfortunate in that regard, but it might be worth it if the new commander does have the Smite tree and is good as a Garrison commander. But besides that, assuming that it's not the Smite tree, I think that we could be looking at a support commander. And the reason that I think this is because if we look back at the infantry Garrison commanders, right, we got Gorgo, which was a single target 2300, and we got Flavius, which was a single target 2300. But besides that, like, if you go back even farther, you look at Zenobia, you look at Constantine, you look at other infantry garrisons like Martel and Richard, they actually don't do any damage as far as like the active skill, right? The active skill for Zenobia was a heal and a buff. We looked at the active skill for Constantine was a buff and a debuff. We look at the active skill for Martel, which was a shield and a buff. We look at the active skill of Richard, and that is a heal and a debuff, right? And so throughout history, most of the infantry garrison commanders haven't actually had damage factor on the active skill, the only exceptions being the two most recent ones. And I think, you know, we could very well see just another plain damage factor type of commander, but I think that because we're in a almost like a transition period right now, I feel like 2025 is a transition period, at least these commanders. And the reason I feel like that is because now that we have established these new sort of types of damage for each of the troop types, and we've kind of entered into this more niche commander build era where you're going to be more focused on certain formations for certain troop types, I feel like it would make sense to shake things up a little bit for infantry garrisons and kind of get them back to their roots. recruits. Okay, and so for me, I could easily see the new infantry garrison commander functioning more similarly to, let's say, Zenobia or Charles Martel or Constantine than to Flavius or Gorgo, right? Because again, it would just be, I don't know, it and maybe this is just a vibe check thing, but it would just be boring if we got another single target damage infantry. Like, I want to see infantry be less bursty in their damage, but much more difficult to take down and swarm down. Like, that's what, you know, when I think about what is infantry supposed to be in my head canon, okay, that's what infantry is supposed to be. It's supposed to be the troop type that you go to when you absolutely cannot lose that flag, and it might not have AoE and it might not have super big skill shots, but it will be very tanky, high health, healing, shielding, buffing, debuffing, damage over time, whatever, lots of normal and counterattack damage. That's what I think of when I think of infantry, and the last two releases weren't necessarily that. We look at, like, for example, Gorgo has a ton of infantry attack, right, which hurts a lot, but it's not mega tanky, right? And so this, you know, if they wanted to change things up here and release an interesting new infantry garrison, I wouldn't be surprised if this did not have any damage factor on the active skill at all, and instead was, you know, mighty healing or a mighty shielding factor plus a bunch of counterattack damage, or, you know, a 50% health boost for 5 seconds or something crazy, right? Like a super tanky, super supportive, either debuffing the target or buffing nearby allies, again going off of the Martel or the Zenobia sort of strategy. I think that is more likely to be the case, or maybe not more likely, but it would certainly be a more interesting infantry release than simply another single target damage commander, right? Things that I think that are kind of off the table, I don't necessarily think this infantry garrison is going to be AoE. Have we ever seen an infantry garrison commander with AoE? I don't think we have, right? So I don't think that that is really a precedent. There's a first time for everything, right? But I just don't really see that as being infantry garrison's thing, quote unquote. I don't necessarily think we'll see skill damage, right? We could, but really I think it's if there's going to be damage factor here at all, I think it'll be smite damage. And even with that being said, I think it's maybe more likely that we see more of a buffing, debuffing, tanky, shielding, healing sort of thing, and I think that would be really cool. Another feature of this garrison that I suspect could be the case is something that we can find actually in Ragnar Prime, and that is the way that his drain works here. It says if this commander is in a field troop, whenever it launches or is hit with a basic attack, it has a 30% chance to drain. Now, the key text here is or is hit with a basic attack, and the reason that this is key is because this is sort of a counter to combo damage. Combo attacks can trigger any effect triggered by basic attacks, okay, and that includes launches / is hit by effects, right? So this literally confirms that combo attacks can trigger the drain effect on Ragnar. And who has combo attacks? Cavalry. And who does infantry counter? Cavalry, right? And so I think that it would make a lot of sense for the infantry garrison to, you know, obviously not only counter cavalry because it's infantry, but also to have something in its kit that counters combo attacks specifically, right? I think that is going to be the case, and you know, we're about to see how powerful Subutai actually is, if he's powerful at all. I know a lot of players are anxious to get their hands on him. A lot of players want to see how he works with Attila, for example. We'll have to wait and see, but his active skill is going to hit like a truck. It's a 3000 damage factor effectively, which is just insane, right? And this is, you know, it's 3 combo attacks, it's 3 hits of 1000, but this all happens in 1 turn, right? And truthfully, you know, if we look throughout the past, it seems like kind of as soon as a new rally commander comes out, the counter to that rally is just right around the corner, right? And so, you know, not to kind of, you know, rain on the cavalry players parade here, but even if this Subutai rally is really strong, I suspect that the upcoming infantry garrison will be a hard counter to it. That's just my gut feeling based on how Ragnar is built and sort of the direction that the game is going. And again, I could be completely wrong here, but that's sort of my vibe check here. And I think that that would make a lot of sense from a rock paper scissors perspective. It would make it a little bit more important to choose the correct garrison, right? Because like then it would be not only do you have to counter the cav rally with an infantry garrison, but it has to be the infantry garrison that counters combo attacks, right? So I think it kind of forces us to niche down a little bit more, which I think is really, really interesting, and you know, having more tools in your toolkit to handle those types of scenarios. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. The last thing that I want to mention here for the infantry garrison commander is that I'm expecting their skills to be very heavy on the when you're serving as a garrison commander. I think that, you know, Gorgo was used in the open field because she was smite damage and it was great. I think that we're going to see probably a lot of the skills for this new infantry garrison commander are probably going to say when this commander is in a garrison or whatever the case might be. I think using this commander in the field, I suspect, will be unlikely. I think Gorgo was more of the exception rather than the rule. So if you're an open field player, I would say that I wouldn't really bank on this, you know, rounding out your lineup, even if it is a smite damage commander. I could be wrong here. I was wrong about Gorgo, right? But I just don't see, you know, especially if this is a sort of healing, tanky, sort of shielding type of commander, I just can't see this commander being even like semi open field viable. Could be wrong, but like even if we look back at CPO Emilianus, for example, he hits like a truck, he's smite damage, but because he just gets like no stats, you just don't really see him in the field very much. Some players have used him and they've gotten some success there because he just hits so hard, but I don't really expect that to be the case for this upcoming garrison commander. Okay, with that being said, let's talk about the open field infantry commander, and I think this is the biggest wild card here, and it's really going to come down to how much the devs want to push the power progression for the game in 2025. I think infantry are in a really good spot right now, especially because of Ragnar Prime, but also because a lot of players are still getting great use out of Alexander the Great and out of Philip II, right? People that weren't convinced about Alexander the Great or didn't want to go back and expertise an old commander, they're getting their hands on Philip and finding that he can be used in a lot of places, but he can be used really well with infantry, right? And so do infantry need a busted open field commander right now? I think the answer is no, right? I actually don't think so. That being said, the Wallace release was good, but it I don't know, it just didn't really move the needle for a lot of people. I expertised him on RIP. A lot of people did, and they found that he was maybe a little bit better than what they were getting before, but depending on the scenario, it just wasn't really worth the expertise, to be honest. So, you know, you can make the argument for both cases where, you know, the last release was just okay, so this one should be good, but we also got Ragnar Prime in between, which was already good, and also they don't really need a really good open field commander. And so for those reasons, you know, I feel like this infantry commander, this open field infantry commander, is probably not going to be an AoE demon. Okay, it's probably not going to be like a single target Giga Chad. It could be. I don't think it's going to be skill damage. I think if it is going to do damage, I suspect he will be, or she will be, a smite damage commander, right? And just like the garrison commander, I think, you know, I wouldn't be super surprised if we didn't get the smite tree here. I think the garrison is more likely to get the smite tree than the open field commander, in my opinion. And if we didn't get the smite tree for the open field commander, I could see a world where we get the support tree, right? It's been a while since we got the support tree for an open field infantry commander. We take a look back. Ragnar Prime was skill, William Wallace was smite, Liu Che was attack, and we got the skill tree on Sargon, and it's been since CPO Prime in the beginning of 2022. So that will literally have been 3 years since we got an open field support infantry commander. Now, it's also worth noting that it's been even longer than that since we got a defense open field infantry commander. However, it depends on if you're counting Pyrrhus or not, right? Pyrrhus technically was an open field defense commander in 2023. However, he wasn't part of an infantry release, so like I don't really think that counts. But besides that, Leonidas was the only one, right? I mean, there's never been another open field defense commander for infantry ever. We've never seen that, right? We've seen the defense tree in like rallies and garrisons and things like that, but we've never seen it for the versatility commander is what I'm trying to say. So I think support and defense are very likely, as well as smite if it's not smite, right? So those are kind of my predictions here for the blue talent tree. As far as, you know, what is the active skill going to do, I suspect it will be probably a single target damage skill, if anything. If it's not a single target damage skill, it's going to be a buff debuff shielding type of commander. I know players wouldn't love that. I also would not be surprised if this was a sort of damage over time commander like Sargon, to be real with you, or if they really wanted to be cheeky with it, they could go the same route as Alexander the Great, where the active skill is a shield and an AoE debuff, and then the second skill or one of the other skills is an instant proc, right? That's another route that they could go. I don't think they'll go that route because they just gave us Philip and we're still using Alexander the Great, so it's like how many of those are they going to give infantry, because they're really good right now. And so I doubt that, right? I doubt that. So that's why I feel like we could be seeing some sort of buff debuff slash damage over time commander here for this open field release. But what I do think that we will see is some sort of debuff. I think it's really time for infantry to get an open field debuff, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was one of those things where, you know, the active skill is a skill shot or a damage over time, and then it's an AoE debuff around the commander himself or herself, right? That's something that I could see happening, because we just haven't seen a good debuff on an infantry field commander in a long time, right? We didn't see it on Ragnar or William Wallace. We didn't see it. Liu Che has a march speed debuff, which is fine. Sargon has a decent debuff if you pair him with an AoE commander. Otherwise it's a single, like a debuff to a single target, and it stacks over time, which is like good, but the rest of his kit just wasn't great. CPO Prime is, like, no pun intended, the prime example of a great debuffing commander. And so, you know, we haven't seen a great debuffing commander for infantry for the field since CPO Prime. And so because of that, I could imagine that we get that. And also because of the recent release of Ragnar Prime, we saw the sort of fall off of Guan Yu, right? And Guan Yu was a great debuffing commander for infantry that we really don't have as much on the field anymore. Some people are still using him with 3 army lineups and things like that, and he's still great for that, but we don't really see him as much. And so could we see a new silence commander, right? I think that would be a really interesting direction for infantry to go. It could function even as a buff to yourself, right? Like you deal, you know, 2700 damage factor to one target, and for the next 3 seconds silence any targets that hit you with damage factor or something like that, right? So whether you get hit with AoE or you get targeted or you get hit by a ranged commander or whatever, like if you hit them in that 3-second window, boom, you're silenced, something like that, right? Or it could literally just be Guan 2.0, which would be a crazy power creep, right? I don't expect that would be the case. I would love for us to get a smite damaged 3 target AoE silencing beast, right? Like that would be insane, but I just don't think that that would be the correct prescription for infantry right now. Infantry doesn't need that as much as infantry does want that. Okay, I would love that, but I don't think we'll get that. So I suspect that the power level of this infantry commander will be more tame. It will be more reeled in, more leashed in, unless you go all in on Smite and you have those good pairings, right? I could see this being a great commander pairing possibly for William Wallace, but in order for that to be the case, he would need to have some sort of like really powerful AoE buff or debuff, plus maybe an instant proc or something like that. Again, at this point, I'm just being honest with you guys, this is probably the hardest open field commander to predict right now, because infantry doesn't really need anything, but also its most recent, you know, cycle release was mid. Okay, I hate saying that because I know people love William Wallace and he's fine, but like he ain't no Ragnar Prime and he ain't no Liu Che, right? Like let's just be real. Okay, so he was fine. Do we get another mid release like William Wallace or no? I don't really know, but I would love to see a really good debuff, even especially a silence, right? Silence would be great, and make him more tanky in the field, make him more punishing. I want to see infantry really embody that counterattack damage, that normal attack damage, like that type of role I want to see in the field. I want it to be the case that if you target infantry in the field, you get punished, right? That's kind of what I would like it to be. But with that being said, I think it'll be single target. As far as damage factor goes for single target, I wouldn't be surprised if it was 2800. That just makes a lot of sense to me. Like anywhere from like 2800, or really anywhere from 2700 to 2900, I think would be reasonable for a single target hit here, especially given the fact that Subutai hits for 3k in a single turn. So I mean, this would be perfectly in line there. Again, also because we saw a single target hit on CPO Aemilianus be 2700, we see that on Huo as well. So, you know, that being said, I can imagine that being the case. If it's AoE, I would expect this to be around maybe 2300, and if it has a debuff, I can expect it to be maybe 2200 200 a 3 target, right? That's kind of what I'm thinking. If it's an AoE debuff, we'll just have to wait and see, right? Because I mean, you know, Guan Yu is a 2000 AoE 3 target silence, right? So it would have to be better than that, and we've moved quite a bit away from the 2000 damage factor over the last year, right? So yeah, 2000 is a bit low. I think it's going to be higher than that, but regardless, I still think it'll be between 27 and 2900 for a single target hit. Maybe it's 3000 depending on how the devs feel, but that's kind of my gut feeling, reaction, vibe check to the current meta for infantry based off of what we've gotten recently and what they kind of need. They don't really need anything, but I think these, you know, if they went this route, I think they could kind of round out a lot of what's missing if they give infantry a smite or support garrison with a just tanky strong buff or debuff, and they give infantry a sort of support or defense open field commander that has a debuff or a silence or something along those lines. I think that would be the most balanced release for infantry right now. I could be wrong. These could be AoE commanders with smite damage that just break the meta, and infantry will just go on to being and continue to be one of the best troop types in the entire game. Recently I made a video talking about what I think the best troop type is for free-to-play players right now. If you missed that video, definitely go ahead and check it out on the channel. But TLDR, I think cavalry have a slight lead here over infantry, but if this infantry release is, you know, any stronger than what I'm predicting in this video, then I think infantry will take number one once again. And I don't know if the devs would do that, considering infantry kind of ran the game for the last like year, maybe year and a half, ever since Liu Che. So we'll have to see, but that is my prediction for the upcoming commander release for infantry. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. Do you think I have a reasonable train of thought here, or do you think something completely different? Do you think that we're going to be getting Sun Tzu Prime, Guan Yu Prime, whatever, and it's going to be an AoE god? Let me know in the comment section below. I just don't think that infantry need that, but maybe I'm wrong and maybe you guys feel like they do, and so let me know in the comments down below. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, then you're going to get a little secret call out here. I'm going to let you guys know what I think the commanders could be, and this is purely a guess. This is not a leak or anything, but this is kind of my going list of commanders that I think that they could add to the game soon in the next couple of years. And I think that we've got a few, and this is in no particular order by the way, but I think Vlad the Impaler would be really cool to have added to Rise of Kingdoms, Hattori Hanzo, Oda Nobunaga, Hammurabi, of course. King Baldwin is a very popular suggestion from players. King Louis of France, Siegfried from ancient Germany, King Tut, right? King Tut from Egypt. Sun Tzu Prime is obviously a big one. So lots of potential commanders here, and if you made it at the end of this video, then you'll be the one to see this. Let me know if any of these sound good to you, and if you made it this far into the video, comment your favorite sword emoji in the comment section below so I know who the goats are who made it all the way to the end. While you're down there, drop a thumbs up on the video. It really helps out the channel a ton. It helps get this video out into the YouTube algorithm so other Rise of Kingdoms players might see it. And subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and click the bell to be notified the next time I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.